Society has sold you an incomplete story, a story that keeps you trapped, obedient, and fitted into what is expected of you, and worst of all, you have believed every word since you can remember. They have told you that youth is the highest point of your existence, that after your 30s everything starts to decline, that once you cross 40 there isn't much left to do. That's a lie. True life doesn't begin when you're young. When you follow the rules and strive to fit in, true life begins. When you realize that everything you have built so far is nothing more than what others expected of you. And that moment, according to Carl Jung, comes when you cross 40. Does it sound strange? Of course it does. It isn't what you were taught, because no one ever tells you that the first 40 years of your life are actually a rehearsal, an accumulation of experiences, failures, and successes that aren't entirely your own. For 4 decades, you have been trained to be someone. You have been programmed to conform, to meet what has been established. And then you reach 40, and something inside you starts to break. It is a silent creak. A crack in the facade that you had built with so much effort. Suddenly, what once made sense begins to crumble. The things that motivated you no longer fulfill you, and the rewards you once longed for feel empty. You start questioning, is all of this real? Who am I? When no one is watching, how much of what I do is truly mine? And here comes the part that no one tells you. This is the most important moment of your life. It is the awakening, the beginning of the process of individuation. Carl Jung explained it with brutal clarity. During the early years of our life, we build an identity based on external expectations. We are children, students, professionals, parents, spouses, but we are rarely ourselves. We adapt, we disguise, we conform to the molds imposed on us, and then, when we reach the midpoint of our journey, when the weight of all those masks becomes unbearable, we begin to awaken. And it is terrifying, because everything you once believed becomes uncertain. Because success, recognition, external validation suddenly mean nothing. Because what once defined you no longer serves you. And there, in that abyss, you have 2 choices. Cling to the old, keep acting, live the next 40 years with the same mask, or strip it all away once more. Here is the truth that few are willing to accept. If you reach 40 without questioning, without feeling that everything you have built might be a lie, it is because you are still asleep, and most people are. Most prefer not to see. They prefer to cling to the familiar, even if it is false. They prefer the comfort of routine rather than the vertigo of authenticity. For those who dare to face the truth, they discover something incredible: freedom. Because when you stop worrying about what is expected of you, you begin to live on your own terms. Because when you realize that you don't have to continue in the same direction just because you've been walking that path for years, you can choose another. Because when you understand that success is not about what the world applauds, but about what truly fulfills you, then you truly begin to exist. And here comes the question that will unsettle you. How much of your current life is truly yours? How much of what you do every day responds to your essence? And how much is merely a reflection of what others expect of you? Are you living, or are you simply acting? It is easy to evade these questions. It is easy to move on without looking too deeply. But at some point, the truth will emerge. Sooner or later, the weight of falsehood will become unbearable. And when that moment comes, when you look around and realize that the path you are following is not your own, what will you do? Here is the key. At 40, it is not the decline that begins. It is the revolution. It is not the end of anything. It is the beginning of everything. It is the moment when you can let go of the chains, abandon the script, break away from expectations, and start writing your own story. The question is, do you dare? Jung called it the process of individuation. I call it rebirth. And you decide what to do with this opportunity. And here is where the real difference lies between those who awaken and those who remain trapped. Because it is not enough to realize that you have been living under a borrowed identity. It is not enough to know that you have been an actor in a play written by others. The true question is, what do you do with that knowledge? Because here is the hard part. When you start stripping away what you are not, when you begin tearing off the layers of expectations, validation, and superficial success, the first thing you feel is not relief, it is emptiness. A terrifying void, because your whole life you have been defined by what you do, by what you achieve, by how others see you. And what happens when you leave all that behind? You face the worst question of all. Who are you when no one is looking? That is why many prefer not to do the work. They prefer to stick with their old identity, because even if it is false, at least it is familiar. Because the fear of the void is real, deep, and paralyzing. But there is something that Jung understood better than anyone. The void is not an end. It is a beginning. When you detach yourself from everything that you are not, when you face the silence of your own existence without adornments or filters, that is when you have the opportunity to rebuild yourself from scratch, to create an identity that is not based on what others expect, but on who you truly are. And here is where the real work begins, because finding your true essence is not something that happens overnight. It is not an instantaneous epiphany. It is a process, a journey of exploration, trial and error, of constant discovery. But there is one fundamental thing you must understand. This process is solitary. No one can do it for you. No one will give you a manual, a formula, or a clear path, because your true self is not found in a book or in advice or in a trend. It is found in experience, in action, in the courage to try, to risk, to be wrong, to start again. And here is the most brutal part. Not everyone will reach this point. Most will never do so. Most will remain clinging to what they know, to what gives them security, even if it is a false sense of security. Because breaking away from everything and starting from zero is terrifying. Because looking inside yourself without distractions is uncomfortable. But if you do it, if you truly dare to immerse yourself in the void, to leave behind what you are not, to explore fearlessly who you could be, then you will understand the truth that Jung tried to teach us. Life is not about meeting expectations. It is about transcending them. When you free yourself from everything that you are not, you can begin to become who you are, truly meant to be. And here is where things get really interesting, because when you start breaking away from what you are not, when you finally face that void I spoke of, something unexpected happens. You realize that the world you once knew is no longer the same. The conversations that once seemed important now feel trivial. The goals that once pushed you to get out of bed every morning now seem absurd. The fears that once paralyzed you are like a veil lifted from your eyes, and suddenly you see reality as it truly is. And no, it isn't a pretty reality. It is a harsh reality, full of artifices of people who have not yet realized that they are trapped on a wheel that leads nowhere. And here arises a problem that no one warns you about. When you awaken, you feel alone, because now you see things that others do not see, because you now understand dynamics that previously went unnoticed. And the hardest part of all is that you realize that many people around you are not on the same path as you. Friendships that were based on superficial interests fade away. Relationships that existed just because they fulfilled an established role begin to feel empty. Conversations that once filled your time now only sound like noise. And here is where many get frightened and take a step back, because no one wants to feel isolated. No one wants to realize that perhaps they spent years or even decades surrounded by people with whom they never truly had a deep connection. But this is one of the most important aspects of the process, because when you free yourself from what you are not, you inevitably also free yourself from those who were only there for the false version of you. It is a brutal filter, but a necessary one, because only when you dare to let go of what does not fit in your new version of yourself can you begin to attract what you really need. Here is where the second phase of this journey begins, because individuation is not only about letting go, but also about rebuilding. And this is what differentiates those who awaken from those who simply get lost in confusion. Some, upon reaching this point, sink into despair and cling to nostalgia, to the idea that maybe they were better off before, when they could still fit into a world that now seems alien to them. But others understand something much more powerful, that they now have the opportunity to consciously choose what kind of life they want to build. Think about it. Up until now, most things in your life have been the result of decisions made under the influence of external expectations. You chose a career, a partner, a lifestyle based on what you were taught was right, successful, acceptable. But now, for the first time, you have the opportunity to choose for yourself. And here is where the next great obstacle appears, the fear of being wrong. Because when you follow the path laid out by others, at least you have the excuse that you were only doing what you were supposed to do. But when you decide for yourself, when you begin to build an authentic life, there is no one left to blame if you fail. That is why many, even after realizing the truth, still do not dare to take control of their lives. They prefer to remain in limbo, in that gray area where they are no longer completely asleep, but neither do they dare to move. But here, another teaching of Jung comes into play. The process of individuation is not comfortable. It is not designed to be easy, because it is about confronting what you fear the most, challenging every lie you have identified with, about destroying the old in order to build something new. It is a process of death and rebirth, and as with every rebirth, it implies going through a period of darkness. But what lies on the other side of that darkness is something that most people will never experience, a sense of absolute freedom. Because when you stop acting according to what others expect, when you begin to build a life that truly resonates with you, something incredible happens. Anxiety disappears. That constant feeling of chasing something that never arrives dissolves. The need for external validation loses its weight, and the urgency to fit in, to be accepted, to meet arbitrary standards fades away. In its place appears something much more powerful, peace, a peace that does not depend on external circumstances, achievements, recognition, or approval. A peace that comes from knowing that you are living according to your truth. It is the difference between merely existing and truly living, between reacting and choosing, between being a copy of what you were told you should be and becoming the most authentic version of yourself. But here is the final great secret that no one tells you. This process has no end. There is no moment when you say, "That's it, I found myself, now I'm completely free." Because individuation is not a destination, it is a journey. Every new stage of your life will bring with it new masks that you must break, new layers of identity that you must shed, new truths that you must discover. What changes is that once you awaken, you can never go back to sleep. And that changes everything. Because when you understand that true life begins when you dare to be who you really are, you start to see everything differently. You begin to make decisions from clarity instead of fear. You start to surround yourself with people who truly vibrate at your frequency, rather than those who are only there because you met their idea of who you should be. You begin to live with intention instead of simply reacting to what the world throws at you. And that is the true difference between those who awaken and those who remain trapped in a dream. Because in the end, the most important question is not what should I do with my life, but rather who do I want to be? And once you dare to answer it honestly, everything else falls into place on its own. And here is where everything becomes truly tense, because now you know you can No longer go back. You can no longer pretend that you haven't heard this, that you haven't felt that knot in your stomach, that you haven't noticed that something inside you has moved. That is the problem with the truth. Once you see it, there is no unseeing it. You can try to ignore it, distract yourself, submerge yourself in routine, and pretend that nothing has changed. But deep inside your mind, something has already broken, and that crack will only grow larger until you dare to cross it. Because if there is something worse than living in ignorance, it is waking up and doing nothing about it. But here comes the most important part. You do not need to have all the answers. You do not need to have everything clear. You only need to take the first step. The fear you feel, the uncertainty, the sense that you might be wrong, all of that is part of the process. And let me tell you something. If you do not feel fear, then you are not truly moving forward, because growth always feels uncomfortable, transformation always hurts, and that is why so few make it this far. Most remain trapped in the paralysis of analysis, in the infinite quest for certainty before taking action. But certainty does not come before you start, it comes along the way. So here is the challenge. Stop waiting, stop looking for a sign, stop asking for permission. No one is going to save you. No one is going to tell you now is the time, because the perfect moment does not exist. There is only the moment in which you decide to act, and that moment is now. But here is the other side of the coin. Do not expect the world to applaud your awakening. Do not expect recognition, unconditional support, or congratulations for daring to break with what is established. Because when you begin to live according to your own truth, you will inevitably become a threat to those who still do not dare to do the same. They will criticize you, question you, try to make you doubt, and they won't do it because you are you. They will do it because your transformation reminds them of their own inaction, because seeing you move makes them realize that they are still stuck. And that is where you must remain firm. That is where you must remember that this path is not for them, it is for you. So do not look for approval, do not look for validation, do not ask for permission, because the only person who can decide who you are is you. And now the decision is yours. You can close this video and continue with your life as if nothing happened, or you can let this change you. You can do what you have always done, or you can start walking in a completely new direction. But if you choose the latter, if you decide to take the first step toward your true life, here is a reminder. It is never too late. Never. The amount of time you've spent in the darkness does not matter. It does not matter how many years you have lived with an identity that wasn't yours. The only question that matters is, what will you do from now on? Because your life is not written. There is no fixed destiny, no predetermined ending. Everything that comes after depends on you. So tell me, are you ready to start living for real? If you've made it this far, I want you to leave a comment with this phrase: the awakening is irreversible. I want to know, who are those who truly understood the message? Who are those ready to take the first step? And if everything we've talked about today resonated with you, subscribe. See you in the next video.